I'm Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of the Society for Human Resource Management. We call it SHRM. I'm so happy to be a part of this major conference. And it's major is not an overstatement. There's never been a more critical time to focus on youth, specifically when you consider how the pandemic has disrupted their lives and how it will most certainly affect their trajectory in years to come. SHRM's commitment to IE&D, we call it inclusion, equity, and diversity, and the education to the employment pipeline is real. We know that in a knowledge-based economy, we need people. And therefore, those people are 10, 12, 15 years old right now. And everything that they are doing at the Big Brothers and Big Sisters organization is going to help us have the talented pipeline we need to grow the American workforce. BBBS and SHRM are in the process of developing a partnership that will align them to have a greater impact on shaping the future of young people in the United States. We know that what we want to talk about today is to discuss the barriers that face both rural and urban communities, and they're ranging from digital connectivity and literacy to gender inequality, education gaps, again, exacerbated by the pandemic, and healthcare disparities. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring on, I'm just the moderator. We have some fabulous panelists, and I'd like to bring them in because they're going to really bring this home for you. A group of 4 of the most talented people you're going to see in the country, arguably in the world. And I'd like to start with them coming on and introducing themselves, starting with Marisa Andrada.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Marisa Andrada, and I am the Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and People Officer at Chipotle Mexican Grill. What I always love to say when I meet people is that I'm so proud to let you know that I am a first-generation American born in Los Angeles, and I have made a passion out of growing companies through growing people. And I think that just goes back to my heritage. My parents were immigrants, and I think they came to the United States to live the American dream. And I hope that in working in large companies, I hope we can do the same in helping to pave the way for young people like the ones that we serve to create opportunity for themselves. Good to see everybody.
And then Tina May.
Hi, thank you. I'm Tina May. I am the Chief of Staff and Vice President of Rural Services here at Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is a 100-year-old farmer-owned cooperative that's situated in over 10,000 rural communities across the country. So excited to be with you all today and to be featured with this panel. Thank you.
Delilah Wilson Scott.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm glad to be here with my fellow panelists. I'm the president of the Comcast NBC Universal Foundation and also lead the diversity, equity, and inclusion work here at Comcast Corporation. So we brought these 2 teams together last year, and I think a lot of the work we're doing speaks to the very work that Big Brothers and Sisters has been doing for years and will certainly grow under Artis's leadership. So excited to be here today with my fellow panelists.
And last but certainly not least, Frank, bring us in.
Hi, everybody. I'm Frank. I work at Nike. And often when I say I work at Nike, folks expect LeBron James. I'm not LeBron James. I apologize about that. The letdown begins. But I am the Vice President of Nike Stores here in North America. I also serve as the executive sponsor of our Ascend Employee Network, which is our network for employees with roots in Asia, Pacific Islands, and the Middle East. Here at Nike, we've always believed sport can change the world. That is a famous Nelson Mandela quote that we fundamentally believe in. It can unite people. It can connect with youth in new ways. So for us, there's a natural connection to Big Brothers Big Sisters and the mission across both organizations. So happy to be here.
Thank you all. I told you they'd be fabulous, right? So we're going to jump right into it. And the first question that I want us all to think about are the priorities and initiatives of each of your organizations in that context, and especially how that overlays with the work at Big Brothers Big Sisters. So the last 12 months has magnified many issues that this country is facing, from gaps and inequities in digital, education, gender, healthcare, and racial equity. Can each of you speak to how your respective organizations are narrowing in on a particular area, because you can't boil the ocean, right? And what commitments have you made to accelerate or even shift, in some instances, your long-term strategic direction on your corporate social responsibility, CSR, ESG, and your approach to community engagement? Marisa?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I'd love to share with you that our purpose at Chipotle is all around cultivating a better world through real food. And we're cultivating a better world because we actually care and love our real food. And it is about the food and animals that we bring to our guests, sustainably raised food, whether it's plants or responsibly raised animals. We care about the supply chain from the very beginning. The second piece around cultivating a better world is through real people. And that sustainability is about ensuring that we create opportunities for people within our organization, but also in the communities that we serve. And then, of course, the environment. Whatever we do as an organization, making sure that we have sustainable practices as it relates to the material that we use in the world to produce either the restaurants that we build and or the food that we deliver to all our guests. In the last year, we've remained focused on our sustainability practices, CSR practices, but I'd say more specifically in the last year, as it relates to people. For example, my title is Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and People Officer. And while I have been the Chief HR Officer for the company, last year was a time to recognize all of the great work that we have done to cultivate an environment where all of our employees can thrive and pursue their passion and also bring their communities along with it. So as we looked at 2020 and lived through it, we really honed in on making sure that we are creating those opportunities for our employees to have a voice and also to shape the direction of how we create opportunity for them, but also to support the communities through those three areas that I told you about.
Thank you, Marisa. Tina, Land O'Lakes, tell me how you and your organization are narrowing in on a particular area. When we talk about all of the issues that are facing young people in our country, and what commitments have you made to accelerate or even shift your long-term strategic direction at Land O'Lakes?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'd like to talk a little bit about our work in the digital divide and in broadband and in rural places in particular. Right before COVID hit, we started an initiative called the American Connection Project. And what we are about with this initiative is we are advocating at the federal and state level for a robust investment in broadband infrastructure. Now, as COVID hit and as we worked our way through the pandemic, a bright light, as we all know now, was shown on the need for broadband infrastructure and how this is now more critical often than the road in front of your house. Right? This is fundamentally a necessity in our lives today. So what we did is we built a large coalition, started small, of course, and we're working with a number of partners with unlikely voices, cross-sector, cross-industries to advocate with us. Now, I'm excited to say that Big Brothers Big Sisters is one of our newest partners. We have 158 organizations that are part of this advocacy network with us. The other thing I do want to mention, and we can talk more about this in further questions, Johnny, is as the pandemic first hit, one of the things we saw in our rural places was the lack of connectivity. And one of the very first things that we did is we turned on free public Wi-Fi at our facilities, and then we asked those partners that are in our network to do the same. And these are in really small rural communities, some unincorporated towns, all the way to big cities like Boston and Los Angeles. We boosted free public Wi-Fi to the parking lots, told people they could drive up and access free public Wi-Fi. Now, the really sad thing about this is now a utility that is still being used. In the fourth quarter of 2020 alone, we saw over 1 million unique visitors drive up and access this free public Wi-Fi service, and they were staying connected between 80 and 90 minutes on average. So this just shows you particularly for our young people in these communities that we all live and serve in, that we need to fix this problem on connectivity. Now, we can talk more about this later, so thanks for the tee up.
For sure. Frank, Nike, just do it. Talk to me. What happened with you all of this last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think earlier you said the word accelerate, and that's definitely the case. It wasn't a departure from what we've always wanted to do. It's essentially saying we have to do it faster. And we believe we have a social responsibility as well as a vehicle to make sure that we are being a part of the change that we want to see. It probably shows up in a couple ways. The first one is that we believe we want to get kids to move. It is critical that sport is a part of their lives, and getting kids to move comes with it incredible benefits. And we also know that specifically girls as well as kids from underprivileged areas, they need more, right? They need better coaching. They also need better commitment. They also need better exposure to a variety of sports. And that is very difficult to do. So a lot of what we're doing in this space is accelerating our plan to get kids to move. The second space is around our financial investments and commitments, I should say, to incredible organizations. We are humble enough to know that while we are the expert in sport, we also need to collaborate and partner with incredible organizations that exist today. Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Portland is one of those organizations, and we are very proud of that relationship that has been going strong for a very long time now, but also on the national scale. We've recently made the largest commitment we've ever made in the past year to multiple organizations, specifically, I should say highlighted by a $140 million commitment to our Black community. So for us, it's making sure that it's not just, giving money to organizations, it's partnering with those organizations to create a better future and making sure that we are also learning from those organizations, including Big Brothers Big Sisters. And the last one's very similar to what Marissa said. I think all companies probably use a portion of 2020 and 2021 to do some self-reflection, right? How can we be better? How can we listen to our employees? And how can we create an environment that allows everyone to show up as the best version of themselves? And that showed up as whether that was training for our own employees, whether that was listening sessions, whether that was empowering our employee resource groups. We certainly did all of that. And we believe that we need to be better internally as well as externally.
Thanks, Frank. And Delilah, I know we've worked together for years, and you're in financial services and now at Comcast, big media technology company. We relied very heavily on you all, a lot of Americans during the pandemic, to continue doing business and to live. Talk to me about, any particular area where you all have decided to accelerate or shift your long-term strategic direction as the president of the Comcast Foundation.
If I could, I want to take a step back. And when I think about 2020 and the pandemic and what we saw from a social unrest perspective, what it did for all of us is bring some perspective and tangibility to the topic of social justice. And when private companies think about the best way we can impact that, we think about economic justice first and economic opportunity. So many times that first instinct, which makes sense for everything that we do, is taking a look at our employee base. And I think that has to be a big part of what all of us do. And while the work we do in communities helps to build pipeline over time, at the end of the day, we sort of need to be pushing on both fronts. So I do think it's important that as companies step back and we think about the best assets we have that can create economic opportunity, it's our workforce. And for us at Comcast NBC Universal in particular, it's our talent, right? Our people, it's our technology, our connectivity, and the reach we have through our various platforms. So when we took a step back in 2020 and said, what could we do in this moment? Not just that would be like a crisis, immediate relief type plan, but truly thinking about this from a long-term perspective, building on a decade of experience, focused on a very targeted diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, also a very targeted community impact plan, similar to Tina, focused on the digital divide, and being clear that getting people connected is not just about that being the end point, right? Just like getting people educated, nobody wants a degree just for a degree's sake. When you're living in poverty, a degree, connectivity, it's about how do I connect that to actual economic opportunity, period. So our focus on expanding the work we do from a skills perspective, education perspective, making sure people don't just have exposure to technology, but how do you leverage technology to monetize that work, to turn into economic opportunity? And I think that's key. And that's where we decided to focus, not because that was just where the need was, which was absolutely the case, but also because we felt like this was our best shot at supporting a broader ecosystem of economic justice. We also expanded to how we think about wealth creation. How do we support small businesses, entrepreneurs in the moment? Right? There were so many small businesses that were able to survive, and there are many small businesses that were not able to survive. But small businesses, especially here in the US, create communities, create jobs, especially jobs for underrepresented populations as well. So we really took that economic opportunity place to heart and said, what could we do specifically in that area? Starting with our $100 million commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that our chairman and CEO announced last June, and really growing from there. So in many cases, we accelerated the work that we were doing to help close the digital divide, working with schools, other cities, municipalities, other funders to make sure people could get connected when we knew that was the main gap between how many people were being able to connect to school, to work. But it was also really, continuing on the theme that my panelists have mentioned is, what could we do differently in this moment? COVID and social unrest, George Floyd and beyond, it made equity much more tangible for people. And while these have been issues that all of us have been focused on for years, especially given our roles, it became that much more critical last year.
You're all kind of, we're repeating each other, and it's a wonderful thing because there's consensus. There's consensus in the business and in industry space where we all know this is a real issue. Education is not just someone else's problem. Someone else, your children's problems are your children's problems. They are all of our problems, right? We need in a knowledge-based economy as many workers as possible. And so with the pandemic, it created a large gap in the education decline and loss in learning. We used to talk about summer loss, and now some kids have lost 2 years of formal education. And so we're here at SHRM talking about the responsibility of employers and business to make sure that they fill the skills gap of the future workforce. So let me ask you, Marisa, as you look at building a young employee workforce, I was in one of your stores recently, enjoyed it. My daughter's a big Chipotle fan.
I love that.
What shifts are you experiencing that change the strategic approaches that you all have on training, professional development, requirements and accreditations, and even the emergence of more diverse employee affinity groups?
Wow. Well, let me start with the shifts that we saw with our employee base. So I think you're all familiar with Chipotle Mexican Grill. We have about 2,800 plus restaurants, primarily across the United States and Canada and Europe. And during the pandemic, all of the restaurants remained open. While the dining rooms were closed, the restaurants remained open. Our employee base, so about 100,000 employees, are primarily millennials and Gen Z. And so one of the first strategic shifts that we saw is that we actually saw more Gen Z talent joining the organization. And in many ways, so we're highly diverse. 67% of our workforce in the restaurants are diverse. And what we learned from those employees is that they were actually helping to support their families with whom they lived at home. There were, multiple generations living at home. And many of them joined with the passion for Chipotle. I mean, they certainly loved eating the food, but really new in the workforce. And so what is it that we could be doing to help onboard them and help them make sure they felt successful? So while we saw that strategic shift in the workforce where there were more unskilled workers, I'll say, joining, but passionate about the company, what we were able to do was help to educate them around our transparent pathway to opportunity. As I mentioned before, our focus as we continued on in 2020 was to focus on people first with our employees. And when I talk about a transparent path to opportunity, one can join at an above minimum wage job, and it can be an hourly job for a while if they want to, or they can actually look ahead of them and within 3 years actually become a general manager, a restaurateur, which is the top level in our restaurant group, and they can actually earn a six-figure salary. I'd say the second thing is we had many students who also joined us, or employees who decided to become students. So one of our benefits that we provided, that we introduced back in 2019, is a debt-free degree. So through our partnership with Guild, it was initially with 5 universities and 75 programs in business and in technology, because frankly, that's where our growth is. Our growth has been opening more restaurants. It's been through the digital access to our product, whether you order it ahead and pick it up, or you drive through the Chipotle or get delivery. How do we build a bridge for this amazing workforce in front of us and develop talent for the future? And so a trend that we saw, and what we saw them do, was to really access our tuition assistance as well as our debt-free degree program as a way of actually building their skills so that they can continue, A, to work for the company, but then B, if there was something beyond, a restaurant level position or operations that they wanted to begin, that they can actually begin that here working at Chipotle with a debt-free degree. And I'd say the third area in which education was really around just self-care. So our purpose of cultivating a better world and cultivating an environment where all of our employees can thrive and pursue their passion. Let's be honest, I think we all went through 2020, and as we approached the pandemic, it really was a mental game. So if you think about it, first and foremost, the health and safety of our employees was our most important priority. We're thankful that we had this food safety culture where our restaurants became one of the safest places to work, along with our wellness checks. But not only talking about physical overall well-being and physical safety, but it was also emotional and psychological safety. And so the education around self-care and access to mental health resources for all of our employees and our families, we also saw an uptick in that, and how important it was to make sure that our employees had the resources that they needed to understand what they can be doing just to take care of themselves and find balance and resilience throughout the pandemic.
So Tina, tell me, you're the VP of Rural Services. A lot of times we focus on, what's happening in the urban markets. What mechanisms are you putting in place to recruit, retain, and develop a diverse workforce? And what new challenges did you address for your workforce in the past year?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One thing I want to talk about is how we've managed all of this and how we're thinking about this going forward in the lens of where I started with the digital divide and the American Connection Project. Now, there's a statistic that 2/3 of college-educated millennials live in just 53 U.S. cities. I'm a farm kid. I'm from a very rural town. Some might call it a village. 460 people, right on the Minnesota-Iowa state line. And for me, what I saw as success in that time, in that place, for me, success was leaving, right? Success was going to college and never coming home. Now, what if we flipped that? The other thing we know is that for rural communities to thrive, you need access. You need access to the internet, access to education, access to opportunities for your kids, like Big Brothers Big Sisters programs, 4-H, and others. You need access to jobs for your partner and your family that are on the farm with you. You need access to economic opportunity, right? And the list goes on and on. So we launched just last month the American Connection Corps, and we will place 50 fellows in 12 states. This is a homecomers model. So the American Connection Corps fellows, we are targeting college grads and community college grads. They will go back home. They will be paid. They will receive a benefits package and a housing stipend. They will move back home for 2 years to communities where they're from, and they will work on issues around connectivity. In some places, that might mean basic access to connectivity. And in some places, that might be digital inclusion and digital skilling. We're building the scope of this work out now, but we really feel like the sky is the limit with this program, and really thinking differently about what rural communities need to thrive moving forward.
Gosh, Tina, you'll appreciate I went to graduate school in Iowa, so I can fully appreciate. I moved to it and had a wonderful time. Let's pivot a little to employee resource groups. Some call them affinity groups, like they're on the rise. And so many of us are studying and wondering, how is that driving change, or is it driving change internally, and how it impacts initiatives of, say, the foundation, in Delilah's case, employee engagement, in the case of all of the panelists, or CSR focuses. And I want to start with Frank. Frank, you mentioned being the sponsor, executive sponsor, that may have been not exactly the title, but of the employee resource group. Are there insights that you've started to gather from the voices of your employees that frankly wouldn't have surfaced before and without having these employee resource groups?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We have 8 employee resource groups as a part of our affinity groups on campus. And I would say the past 15 months supercharged each of them, right? For us, I think it really allowed us to understand the voice of our employee base. And we talk a lot at Nike. We believe in the philosophy of be, do, and say. And essentially what that means is be the person or be the change you want to see, do it, like actually behave in that way. And then you've earned the right to say something. Now, in today's society, it's very easy to go the other way. So, yeah, everything allows us to go the other way very easy. And often we say things before we do things, and we never really become that person. Our employee resource groups have been able to help this organization be the people we want to be and be the change that we want to see. And that happens through just truly listening to the voice of each group. And in each resource group, the Ascend Network has over 4,000 employees that are a part of this network, each with an incredible point of view to share with the organization to make us better. So for us, it has really shined a light around helping this organization be educated, drive awareness, and have really good dialogue so that everyone can take that first step to being the person and being the change they want to see. I also think, as I listen to the panelists, our resource groups have shined a light around what DE&I really stands for. Sometimes it gets thrown around like a buzzword, and you just kind of like lump them together as diversity. And I think we all, can agree that diversity is a component of it. And on this 3-legged stool, if the other 2 fall apart or they're wobbly, the whole thing falls down. And I think a lot of when I hear Tina speak, there's an equity portion in there. When I hear Marissa speak and Delilah speak, there is an inclusion piece in there. Our network and our employee resource groups are incredible at helping us understand what needs to happen across diversity, equity, and inclusion, and holding the company accountable to that. I would say while the challenges still exist today across all of society, awareness within Nike that we have a challenge is at an all-time high. And awareness that we need to be a part of the change and make society better, as well as make our employee experience better, is at an all-time high. And I give a lot of credit to that to our employee resource groups.
I love it, Frank. And you said something that I often say in some of my speeches. I say it this way, though, for 20 years, 30 years, those of us who worked on Diversity Matters, separate and distinct, we came along to talk about inclusion and equity. It wasn't always DE&I, but, we all kind of thought if we got diversity right, everything would be resolved. And here we are as a country that is as diverse of a workplace as it's ever been, but at once it's as divided as it's ever been. So diversity in and of itself created a whole different set of issues, and thus the importance of a focus on inclusion and equity. So Marissa, one of the things that, when we talk IE&D or DE&I, when we talk just diversity work, we oftentimes are focused on internal matters, right? How it impacts us internally within our organization. From an economic equity perspective, can you speak to how you, in particular, and your colleagues at Chipotle Mexican Grill have engaged in partnerships that are building opportunity? Talk to me about the external work that you're doing to build opportunities for all.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to jump off of where Frank was talking about employee resource groups. We actually leveraged our employee resource groups. We have 6 of them in the company. One is called Chipotle Serves, and it is about serving the community. And the Chipotle Serves team really enabled our general managers. So our general managers run the restaurants to actually identify the local community organizations that they support and how can we donate grants to them so that we can do important work as relates to equity, in the community. And so we were able to, through our Chipotle Serves ERG, help our general managers identify 300 organizations across the United States and Canada where our GMs can not only participate with their time, but also provide a meaningful grant to their most important foundation and organization in their community. And then if I think about other organizations where it's really about supporting ventures across the company that are focused on sustainable business practices, we continue to partner through our Illuminaries program. And what that is, it's like an accelerator or incubator program that Chipotle has co-sponsored with another organization called Unchartered. We bring in CEOs, we bring in celebrities who all have sustainability as a common foundation as the mentors to these Illuminaries, is what we call them. But it's 8 young venture projects really focused on sustainable business practices. So those are ways externally how we've focused on building equity in that community.
Well, I'm loving it. Listen, I want to go to our final segment, and I want to do a little bit of a round, right? I want to quickly get in this question because it's about something that I know we are all passionate about, and that is mentorship. Now, what we know is that we have an audience of community leaders. They're listening right now who are doing equity work by breaking down barriers for their youth through mentorship. Delilah, what roles do you see organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters playing in the work of equity?
Well, I think something that resonates with all of us is that, a couple of years ago when Big Brothers Big Sisters made it clear that defending the potential of our young people was going to be the focus, I think that sparked a different type of conversation. So number one, when I think about the 12 Beyond School Wall sites we have across the country, mentors give young people perspective. They help you kind of see potential in yourself that you might not otherwise see. And when we think about asset-based framing, which is this concept, and I think we have to be thoughtful about it when it comes to philanthropy, when I'm supporting young people, the starting point is I know this young person can be a CEO. I know this young person can succeed in whatever way possible. But if I don't believe that, then it becomes a nice thing to do versus I'm investing in that person's future. And I do think mentors can help shape and can help build future leaders in a way that, in addition to sort of the hardcore skill sets some young people might have access to from an education perspective, defending that potential at all costs because you know that potential is real and you absolutely are committed to realizing it. That's what makes the difference in an organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Love it. Frank, what innovations are you seeing and formulating to help empower youth in America at Nike?
Yeah, honestly, I think, I was thinking about the relationship with mentorship. I think we all agree, but sometimes conveniently forget that a mentor relationship is both ways. The mentee learns from the mentor, but absolutely the mentor will learn from the mentee. And if you believe otherwise, you're wrong. I mean, it is truly a two-way relationship. So for us, a lot of what we're trying to do in the innovation space is not necessarily, thinking about massive tech capabilities. It's just unlocking what we talked about throughout the course of this call, which is how do we give access? How do we make sure that we are doing the blocking and tackling that allows these kids to actualize their potential? That's where a lot of the focus really, for us needs to be. I would bet the house on the next couple generations. And every company should understand that these generations by blood are the most diverse generations we have ever seen. They believe they have the most power when you give them the mic that we have ever seen. And they're more connected to everyone across the world than we ever were. So for me, a lot of what we try to do is just remember that, again, I bet the house on these kids. And what we can do to give them access will allow us to actualize that.
Tina, Marisa, Delilah, Frank, thank you. This has been incredibly helpful. And everyone else out there who's listening in the Big Brothers Big Sisters universe, thank you for all the work that you do every day. Because as Frank said, we've got to bet it on this generation. After all, they're going to be the people who have to take care of us, right? So we have a vested interest in seeing this all work out. Thank you very much. And thank you for the leadership, Artis Stevens and his team at Big Brothers and Big Sisters for the work that you're doing. Thank you.